Yes, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Rugby Muscle Podcast and another live Q&A edition on the Rugby Muscle Athletes Facebook page. I look ridiculous because I am wearing sunglasses, but it is with good reason because my eyes are I say eyes. My one eye, my right eye has been absolutely taken through the ringer this last week or so. Look, check it out. Yeah, so it's pretty gross. So I've decided that I'm going to do this Q&A edition wearing these just to stop my eye causing a big distraction, and looking at the screen does actually really hurt. So usual stuff to get going. Questions. If you have any questions on this live, thumbs up as always. Ask any questions in the live feed and you will get them answered. I'm playing around with a few new features here, so you can find these questions and this live stream if you're watching on the YouTube every week. Facebook.com/Rugby Muscle Athletes. That's where these questions will be asked. That's where I am answering these questions from, and from the YouTube comments below. Or below other live feeds. Let's, without further ado, get to the questions, which I can't quite read because bloody sunglasses make it it makes it easy enough to save my eye from the glare of the screen, but it's a little bit too dark to actually be able to read the screen itself, which is fantastic. But what I would like before we get into this is thumbs up for putting this effort in. It will be a shorter one. I do apologise. I'll try and get either one extra one next week or just get back to the normal schedule. As you can see, the more support you give, the more I can invest in the software and stuff, the more these lives become slightly higher quality. And I really hope you do appreciate the higher quality, because it means I get more information, and it's not just my face on a screen explaining things. It's a little bit more easy for you to digest, as it's a little slightly more entertaining, I would assume. So, thumbs up always helps. Comments in the questions in the comments below, or just comments if you're watching on YouTube. Thumbs up on the Facebook feed because it helps get out to everyone's show, and 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Even if you if you use Spotify or whatever, make sure you're subscribed on Spotify. But there's no way to give us a review on that. But there is a way to review us still using Apple Podcasts, because that does help the stream get more popular, and then it helps it get out into people's news feeds, and therefore we get more questions, therefore we get more traction, can get better guests, and do all this fun sort of software stuff. So, without further ado, I said we would be about 5 minutes. I can't read how many minutes we've gone already because my eye is buggered, so it's brilliant. Let's just get into the first question. Zachary, this is a question that's been quite a while coming because I skipped last week, and it was supposed to be asked last week, but we ran on for quite longer, or 2 weeks ago even. He says, I've always... Hang on, let me make this text bigger, because it is just... This is something I didn't anticipate coming, didn't even think about, like not being actually able to read the questions because my eye is bad. But we will persevere. Zachary says, I've always believed that wrestling/grappling is the best experience to simulate the contact portion of rugby. Does anyone have any drills they would recommend or have used to incorporate wrestling and grappling into rucking/tackling, even just overall body movement? So for me, absolutely, you're very correct with your assumption that grappling and wrestling is a very transferable practice to have and to incorporate into your training. It's something that I just don't see still quite often enough. You see it everywhere now in the top ranks of rugby. Are my sunglasses straight? In the top ranks of rugby, they all have different wrestling coaches come in. A lot of them have full-time wrestling coaches now, with the bigger premiership clubs and the national teams and stuff. It's definitely the art of... it's grappling is just physical combat without striking. It's about manipulating your opponent as best you can, using their body weight against them and using your leverages. It's perfect for ruck training. It's really, really good. The way you would just incorporate it, to me, would be just to make sure you've got a partner and just go through some low level, like situational rucking, and you would use your wrestling skills to try and go about it. Too often, no one's, I think I said this in the last live, which was 2 weeks ago. Too often people are never actually taught how to tackle or to ruck. They're not taught these basic skills, these basic contact skills. They're just taught to toughen up or get stronger or be more explosive. And it's like, well, what about if you improve the skill of rucking? Does that mean that you can be more efficient? Of course it bloody does. It's the same theory why power lifters and Olympic lifters practice just doing their lifts, because it's having strength is just one component to completing a movement, no matter what that movement is. Being efficient with your movement is going to be far more beneficial, or at least just as beneficial, in order to help you with your ability to ruck and or tackle. So I would just break those skills down into different situations. I'd first start very low level, slow. One person's jackling over the ball, or how you'd get there if someone got tackled, and you would just practice getting into the right position. There's usually 3 different common types of ruck that you would do. One would be where where you're there before any of the defending team there, so you would just seal it. There would be one where you and your opponent are both arriving at the same time to a ruck, and then there would be one where the opponent is already over the ball. I would practice several different scenarios with that at a real low level, just so that you select the right option each time. Because it's not just a case of being able to do the skill; it's choosing which skill to perform. Right? It's not just about being strong; it's choosing the right skill, then performing that right skill, and then expressing your strength as long as you've chosen the right skill to do it. It doesn't matter if someone's already over the ball and they're sealing the ball, or they are jackling and they're trying to steal the ball from your team, and you get there and you just try and perform a seal, or you try and ruck but you're too high. It doesn't matter how strong you are, for the most part, you're gonna probably lose out in that situation. So definitely choosing the right technique to use, practice that at a low level, and then just work up to a higher level. There are different drills that you can do. I believe Rugby Strength Coach has those on his website. I'm interviewing him soon, so I'll get him to plug those, but they're quite good. Otherwise, if you've just got a partner, you can just do lots of different basic sumo wrestling skills or practices or drills where you've got a grid of 2 meters by 2 meters, and you just you can either start in a scrummaging position, you can start one arm under, one arm over, and you're just going to try and manipulate your opponent. And you can do that on your knees. You can do one arm under, one arm over, and you're going to try and fight to get both double underhooks. That's a fantastic drill. And that is actually something that we are going to look to do once we know when there is a rugby season with Team Rugby Muscle, because I think that with us now, a lot of players will have had well over a year without any contact situation. That might just really be asking for injuries to happen, particularly with around the shoulder area and stuff, just to go back into it, even if you are stronger. So we're going to be introducing grappling before before the world gets back to playing rugby. We will have a couple blocks where we're introducing that. Now, is it necessary to do when you're completely in the off season? It could be an idea, because it could be somewhat of a fun practice to do, but it could also be slightly detrimental, because you learn all these skills and then you go away from it to do other sort of training, and then by the time you get around to the season, you've forgotten what those skills feel like, and you've forgotten how to replicate them and implement them into your actual rugby practice. So it's very, very situational. It's something that you've got to be kind of smart with, but I would encourage people to do grappling training as part of their training for rugby. Now, the other thing that you can do is use wrestling, like more general wrestling, as a fitness component to improve upon your physical fitness. It's a lot of the time you see people that do, they go through a preseason and they spend, hours upon hours of doing running and doing skills, and then they get to their first match and they can just feel themselves draining after the first 20 to 30 minutes. And that's because you haven't practiced your running and your skills along with doing rucking stuff. So you would incorporate rucking with that. And again, probably because it is so fatiguing, that would be done more towards, closer towards the season getting started. Okay. I think we only have 4 questions or 5 questions today, so I'm going to try and get through all of these really quickly. Obviously, if I get any more questions in the live feed, I will answer them as they come in. But the next question says, is from Jeena, and she says, how can I build my strength to be that untackleable person on the field? And is there a way to improve speed at home if currently do not have access to a field or a gym to train? Yes. So if you don't have access to a field, firstly, like, you can be more creative and get access to a field for the most part. Like, even in most lockdowns now, this isn't every lockdown. There are situations where you cannot leave your house, which is kind of ridiculous, but that is the case for some people. Then maybe this is you, but for the most part, people can get to a field to actually do some practicing, and that would be your easiest ticket to get faster, is practice sprinting. Like, even it would just be 10 to 20 meter sprints, lots of rest, lots of full recovery, then I would go again. In terms of how you would do it at home, you can do jumps, you can do acceleration drills against the wall, where you would just try and get your sort of body in a nice strong line, and then practice driving your knee up. You wouldn't push the wall like you're doing a sled push. You would just find that position and hold that position, and then you would just get used to having that position, so that when you get back to running, you would that position that's efficient to help you accelerate faster would feel more normal, and you would be able to efficiently be able to sprint faster, and then be able to transfer that into running. You can also just practice, getting stronger. Plyometrics, different jump sequences can also all be done at home. Those would be my best ways. And then you could also, if you improve your power, practice do a lot of jumping, a lot of single leg jumps, a lot of pops. You could do rear foot elevated split squat jumps. You could do hops in different directions. All this stuff would give you the potential to be faster. And then once you do go back to sprinting, you would then actualize those gains, meaning that you'd be able to utilize that power in a sprinting manner, and then become faster because of that. In terms of how can I build my strength to become that untackleable person, that's all about having a real strong core. And actually, that's another way that you can definitely become faster from home, is training your core, doing a lot of planks, a lot of side planks. Anti-rotation work is fantastic, so your bird dogs, however you can really work your core, leg lifts, all these sorts of things are fantastic for building a nice strong core. And your core is really what sort of holds your strength together and stops you from being able to be manipulated. Even if you're strong and you have a weak core, you can have someone that pulls at your it's like if you've got a really big tree, right, and this tree has big thick branches. Those branches are your arms and your legs, right? But if the trunk itself is kind of weak, you can grab one of those branches and that tree will sway from side to side, or the wind comes and the tree will sway everywhere, right? Whereas if you've got a tree that's got a real thick, strong, dense trunk, you can pull that motherfucker, but that tree ain't moving anywhere. And that's the exact same way it works for building out a strong core for your rugby, strength and conditioning, I guess. Quick pause for a coffee break here. Once again, if you've made it already here and you haven't given a thumbs up, or if you're watching on the YouTube and you haven't commented, please do so. It really does help out. Adam asks, would a full body session be better than the classic legs, arms, etc. for gaining muscle mass? I'm 105 kilos, 6'3". No idea. There's no better. There is. I would do it that way. If you have 3 sessions a week to work with, I like doing full body sessions, but it doesn't mean to say that you have to do legs every day. You could do full body, but you could do, you could do different, each body part technically, or each movement category twice a week. I wouldn't think of these sessions in terms of absolutes, and that's a problem that everyone sort of has. Look at your week. Look at the work you've got to get through the week. Look at how you want to, how frequent you want to train different movements, and then just divide it up as necessary. you could, for example, if you know that you need to do some sort of hinge movement, so you need to do Romanian deadlifts, and you need to do squats, and you also want to do split squats, and you also want to do a high volume lunges, maybe you need 3 different days so that you get the best out of all 3 of those movements. Whereas if you just said, right, I know, I'm not bothered about getting my legs too much bigger, but I want them to be stronger, maybe you only need 2 days for those different things. It would massively depend on, and then it could be one of them takes too much time, and you figure out that actually after you've done your deadlifts, there's no possible way that you can squat anyway, so you don't want to put those 2 things on the same day. Or it could be that your deadlifts are much more efficient after you've squatted, because then you know that your hamstrings are going to be the body part that gives out rather than your grip. Because you don't have to go as heavy, right? So many different variations that you could do on it. It's not like we have to stop thinking as optimal for each session or for each week. You want to figure out how much volume you want to put into a session and figure it out which way. But for the most part, I'm always going to be a fan of leaning towards full body if you can only train 3 times a week. If you can train more, then maybe it's worth splitting it up, but not always, and it's not always necessary. The only difference there would be if you have 3 full body weight sessions plus, some heavy conditioning that's quite tough on the legs, you would look at splitting that up as well. Again, more details, the better, and I can answer that question a little bit better. Patrick says, we've got 2 more questions, and we are going to rattle through these quite quickly, and my eye is going to get a break. So for those that didn't see it earlier in the post, yeah, it's not. I'm very self-conscious about that. Hopefully it'll be fine by next week. Patrick says, hey Tom, started playing in college, and one of our coaches told me that the Olympic bar deadlifts are more harm than good, and to take them out of our preseason lifting programs. I was just wondering what you thought of this, or what you thought, and if this is true. If you've listened to enough of these podcasts, you know that I rarely speak in absolutes, because there's a reason these things exist. No matter how fatiguing or how wacky some sort of methods are, there's usually a reason and a benefit to be had in some sort of circumstance. I would say for the most part, I would agree with the guy. I'd say if there is any time to do deadlifts, probably going to be in the off season. They are very fatiguing. I don't think they cause more harm than good. I just think that for the fatigue that they create, they don't give you too much of a benefit. You don't move any muscle group in a full range of motion. For the most part, you're going to be challenged on your grip. You put a lot of strain on your lower back. It takes a lot of fatigue. You need to spend a lot of time deadlifting. You can't just get done, set up and finish your deadlifts within 5 to 10 minutes. You could probably do that with some sort of, or you could definitely do that if you're doing like hamstring curls of some sort, or even Nordic hamstring curls, right? That would be done in 5 to 10. So it's not efficient. If you have a lot of time and you really, you have some sort of real big, not like, you have some sort of emotional attachment to it, you enjoy doing it, it can have a benefit. If you're really weak and you just need overall total body muscle, probably a good idea to, it's actually a good bang for your buck, because you don't need to do too much. Whereas once you start to need to require more and more and more different exercises to get stronger, to get more muscle, to build more explosive power, then because it takes up so much fatigue and you need all this other stuff to get the benefit, it starts to become like a bit of a negative. It gives you so much fatigue but not enough benefit. Whereas if you only need to do, if you're an absolute beginner or you're in the first few years of your training and you know that you have a lot of strength potential still to reach, you have a lot of muscular potential still to reach, and you only need to do 5 to 10 sets of total work 3 times a week, you don't need too much volume, then your deadlifts are really good, because then you're getting the most bang for your buck out of those few sets. Whereas if no matter what, you need to do, for example, and these are just like arbitrary numbers, but you need to do 20 sets, of lower body to really, get some good strength gains in your lower body. Spending 5 of those sets on your deadlift taxes you so much for the rest of the stuff that you can't get the best of everything, you know? And that's sort of what I think what your coaches are getting at. There are just many better alternatives to use. Trap bar deadlifts, for some reason, get a free pass, but they are also just as fatiguing. I'd say they put slightly less pressure on the lower back, but they are a higher risk of injury. They're often more perform worse. So I would be cautious to say, oh, well, it turns out the trap bar deadlifts are so much better. Not always. And like I said, the reasons they're fatigued, or the reasons they're not that great, because no full range of motion with any muscle. There's you have to use so much weight, which causes so much unnecessary fatigue. Put your lower back in a position where it's slightly exposed, which can be a good thing if you have a weak lower back, you know. But for the most part, most people aren't training to get stronger lower back. They're training to get, stronger glutes and hamstrings and posterior chain, which does include the lower back, but they're not aiming for it. But it is something that I think you need to learn to do to start out with. So I've sort of talked out of both sides of my mouth there. The easiest way to do this is just to do Romanian deadlifts and do a lot of core work around it. So then you're working on that lower back, you're working on your hamstrings a little bit more efficiently. And then when it comes to deadlift, maybe you could do. And this is what I do with my guys: is we have a deadlift block for probably a month or so every year or so. It's something that does have its place, but yes, there are a lot better alternatives that are less fatiguing in most situations. Okay? Cool. All right. We are nearing the end of this podcast. This has flown by. Let me just see if I can... Oh. Yeah, one more time looking at that funky eye. We have one last question to finish off with this faster podcast Q&A edition today with my wonky sunglasses. We have Mr. Johnson, who came back in the YouTube comments. Always have started to enjoy answering these questions from the YouTube comments, so it's quite cool. He says, thanks for answering my questions. Given that I'm relatively well-rounded, I'm taking your advice and have decided that acceleration and change of direction is going to be my main work on in order to get good at it. So going back to my original question, putting aside the pitch work, which I agree is where speed is built, would concentrating on balancing out my squat deadlift discrepancy actually help with my acceleration and change of direction to any significant degree, or should I focus on other things? I would focus on other things, but those other things might sort out that quote-unquote discrepancy. What you've got to do really is, well, firstly, go back on my YouTube channel, on youtube.com/c/rugby muscle, I think. Just type in rugby muscle on YouTube, or rugby muscle needs analysis, and what you will find is a video where I run through exactly how you can create your own plan and how you can figure out what you are lacking in. And it's like, you just have to answer these questions, and in answering these questions, you'll figure out exactly what you need to do. If you've got a weak, I can't remember if your squat was weak and your deadlift was strong, or the vice versa, but it doesn't really matter. That would just be a demonstration that probably you have like slightly weaker hamstrings or a weaker core, and that would also come up not just by looking at these lifts. This would also come up by you examining your body, your physique, your strengths, your weaknesses in a game, and you'll be like, right, I think I'm a bit weak in the posterior chain, or my core is weak, Depending on where you give out in your squat or where you give out in your deadlift, you should be able to assess and look at it and say, it's my core, it's my lower back, or whatever it is. Then you would go about improving those things. So I think, going back to the earlier question, what you could do, I think, here is, if I remember right, it was the deadlift is fairly weak. This is probably a core thing, which would have some impact on your squats as well, but sometimes people can sort of get away with a weak core on squats by just like putting a belt on really, really, really tight. So I think that's probably is what is going on here, that you have a bit of a weak core. So I would really try and concentrate on getting a real strong core, doing probably different, 4 times a week, different core variations, rotations, planks, anti-flexions, which is planks, flexions, so crunches or sit-ups, etc. You could do it from the lower, by lifting the legs or by lifting your torso. You want to do twists, which is rotations. Again, I've already mentioned that. Sorry, I'm getting confused here. Lateral flexion, so your side planks from side to side, and then you want to do some sort of posterior planking exercise as well, or a good one. Deadlift is a good one, but like if you just stand up and your kettlebell swings, or if you just stand up holding a band that's like threaded between your legs, so like a kettlebell swing but standing up tall. That's really good as well to build out your core as well. Do not forget dead bugs. Do not forget bird dogs. Those things are going to be massive in helping build out a real strong core, and you've got to be really patient with it. Once you've been patient with it, that's going to absolutely help your change of direction. Again, we refer to that trunk that we were talking about before of a tree. All you're doing when you're building out, getting a stronger core, is building out that, making that thicker and thicker and thicker. Then when you want to change direction, now you've got the trunk leaning in the direction that you want it to go. Whereas if you've got a weak core, say you're cutting at the minute to your left, okay? I'm not sure if this is mirroring and showing it to the right, but you're cutting out to the left, right? Your core is being dragged in this direction. Momentum is dragging you in this direction. Then, if you want to change direction, you want your core to not resist. What happens when people have weak core is that they're still going in this direction, even though they want their legs to go here, and it makes the movement a lot more difficult. Whereas if you've got a really strong core, then you're able to move in any direction that you want at, on a dime piece. You can really move fast because you've got a strong core. If you look at any Olympic athletes where they do sprints, or if you look at any of the Fijians, thick, strong cores. None of them are weak in the core, and I think that's something that you really want to work on in order to help. Number one, which is your priority, is change of direction and acceleration, but also then you might see it even out your squat deadlift discrepancy. Now, I wouldn't worry about addressing it unless it's something that is holding you back. You would just probably anticipate that if it is your deadlift that is weak, your deadlift numbers would go up at a faster rate, and ideally your squat numbers also slowly go up, but your deadlift numbers increase faster. The biggest thing I see when people say that they've got discrepancies, and I've answered this question before when people say, "Oh, I've got one arm stronger than the other." If you're saying that you want to address the discrepancy, the biggest way or the easiest way to do that is just to let one side get weaker. But you don't want to do that. You want to get both sides you want to keep both sides being stronger. And so really what you want to do is address where the weakness is in the one that is weaker and bring that up, and then bring your whole body strength and power up in order to somewhat even it out. Now, that brings this show to a close. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, thumbs up. Facebook.com/Rugby Muscle Athletes is where you can ask these questions. I won't, in the future, be wearing funky sunglasses, I hope. And I hope my eye will be a little bit better, and we will be able to have a good interactive Q&A that will run on for a little bit longer. But without further ado, this one will be over. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.